Welcome to In the Room, where we explore the elusive world of casting for film, TV, and commercials. Join us as we interview directors, writers, producers, and actors, taking a deep dive into their experiences with casting and how the ultimate decisions are made in bringing a story to the screen. Get an inside look at casting and find out what really goes on in the room. Hi, I'm Heather Kafka, and I'm an actor.
I am John Williams. I am a casting director, among other things. Today, remote, we have Kevin Ford. And I got this off of IMDb, which looks like it's pretty updated. So it seems like you did it, no?
It's possible.
Okay,
It's
possible.
probable.
We'll see. Let us know if there's anything. I think I know you well enough that I think all this is real. Kevin Ford is an award-winning... That's not right. No. Kevin Ford is an award-winning filmmaker who produced, shot, and edited the Netflix feature documentary Senior about the life and works of filmmaker Robert Downey Sr., which premiered at Telluride 2022, and also won the Best Documentary from the National Board of Review. Some other notable works by Ford include The Pathway, a doc-series about NBA basketball prospects for TNT, which he shot and directed with James D. Stern. In 2021, Kevin directed Face the River, a documentary for RCA featuring musician Gavin DeGraw. In 2020, Kevin directed, shot, and edited a documentary, The Pushback, produced by Richard Linklater, which was the official selection of South by Southwest 2020. Also won 3 awards at El Paso Film Festival, including Best Director. In 2018, Ford produced, shot, and edited Sony Picture Classics documentary American Chaos. Other acclaimed projects include The Bomb, director-editor, which was the closing night film of Tribeca 2016, and was also featured at the 2017 Nobel Peace Awards ceremony. We have a Nobel Peace Awards ceremony guest.
Oh my God. Okay, John.
Ford was a director of Stone Barn Castle, a soul-searching documentary with Adrian Brody, which premiered at South by Southwest 2015, as well as the rock and roll feature 3 Days starring Jane's Addictions, which premiered at Slamdance 1999. Narrative features Ford has directed included the drama Legs, starring Eddie Steeples, which premiered at the 2014 Cinesider film series, as well as 2 indie features with Ella Coltrane and an indie romance, Drowned, and a road film by the River, which was produced by Adrian Brody and premiered at the 2016 Sidewalk Film Festival. As a cinematographer, Ford worked on a documentary series for A24 and HBO, and previously he shot the feature for Roman, produced by Lucky McKee, as well as the 2003 political documentary The Party's Over, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman. In 2023, Kevin directed a new feature, Everything is Stolen, featuring Ella Coltrane, and we are currently working on a documentary called 67 Bombs to Enid. And he has many other projects going on.
Clearly, you stay busy.
I mean, the bio says it all. Is there anything left to say?
I don't know, man.
So
okay,
there is a lot.
Over.
There's a lot to talk
Thanks
about.
Thanks for coming.
I a lot of times I feel like, man, I haven't done shit. I'm still trying to get the first project going. It's how I actually feel. And then when I hear you recite this thing back that I did actually craft, I'm like, man, I've done a couple things.
Yeah. I feel that way sometimes.
That's a human condition.
I walk into like a coffee shop in LA and everyone looks at you and they're like, oh, that's nobody. And you're like, I've done some shit, man.
Yeah.
I've made some things. You're washing the dishes, dude.
Yeah. We all feel like a fraud.
Yeah.
At some point. Yeah.
So that being said, I don't know how the fuck you got into this.
You want to know?
Yeah, I want to know. I'm here.
You were born
present.
You were in Austin for a while, but you were born in Oklahoma, right?
No, I wish that would be kind of cooler backstory, but it's similar. I was born in a town of 500 people.
What town is that?
Sorry. That's not accurate. I was born in a city called Sacramento. But I was raised in a town of 500 people where my mom was born, my grandmother was born before that, and my family goes back there to the old gold rush days. So way the hell back in the mountains of Northern California between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. Mark Twain wrote a book about the area where I was raised called The Jumping Frogs of Calaveras County, I think, something like that. But it's about this frog jumping tradition. So anyway, that was our big claim to fame. And when I grew up, that was like the big thing was there was a frog jump where I grew up. People from all over the world would come pick a frog from a pond, put it on a stage, and hit the stage. Whoever made the frog jump the furthest won. And it got really pretty popular. And a guy from France came in, and it was a big scandal because he got a giant African bullfrog, and the locals were really pissed. And they said, this isn't fair. But he said, there's no rules that say you can't have an African bullfrog. Needless to say, the African bullfrog set a record that's never been broken.
Wait, don't they eat frogs in France?
Yeah, that's weird.
Frog legs, yeah.
Isn't frog legs like a delicacy?
But now, did he leave the African bullfrog? And now there's
that's a good question. I didn't pay that much
attention. It might be a fair competition now.
Yeah.
It might be.
They might have.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of place I was raised. It was an old logging community. You know, after the gold rush went away, of course, it became kind of like logging and stuff. But by the time I grew up, that industry had gone. It had just become, there really wasn't a local industry up there. And so as a person that was aspiring to get into filmmaking, there wasn't a lot of opportunities there.
Why were you a person aspiring?
That's what I was going to say.
Where'd
such
that
an
come from?
easy jump.
Transition from frogs to
to
cinematography, filmmaking.
I'm sure so many people have the same story, but it must have just simply been exposure to movies, like, parents taking you, and like so many others in our field, I think just as a child, like whatever that was, like hit me harder than just a viewer. It was like, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So to date myself, because I'm the age that I am, but VHS cameras were just coming out when I was 9 or 10 years old. And my aunt, my mom's sister, got one, her and her husband, just to record their home movies. And my friends and I jumped on that thing, and we just began making all kinds of things, skits that turned into, spoof parodies of Hollywood films. And then we started to get really far out. Probably by the time I was 12 or 13, we started messing around when I was 10. But by the time I was 12 or 13, you started to see some original works like World of the Uncircumcised, which was a talk show that had a set just like yours. But it was a show about the uncircumcised, and
this is amazing.
And then, but it started truly. We were just doing like spoofs, like instead of Star Wars, it was Fart Wars, or Star Trek, it was Star Wreck, or instead of Rocky, it was Cocky. And it was all these like juvenile children, kind of mimicking the Hollywood things we loved. But then honestly, I kept at it. It was just fun. I think me and my friends who enabled me, even with my friends that they wanted to be in it, and it was a fun thing for us all to do, like almost like how you'd have like a slumber party, but people would come over and we'd make these films. And obviously you had to edit VCR to VCR back then, but we would kind of make them and then, show whoever our family or friends. But by high school, I was really still very serious about it. My mom and my uncle ended up putting their money together and getting me my own camera, so I didn't have to borrow my aunt's all the time. And then it was off to the races. And then I started to really do, strange little music videos, and it just kind of kept escalating. But to condense it a little bit, by the time I was 17, my mom, who saw that I was like super interested in this, like not more than just a hobby, she said, there's a local public access station, and there's an older gentleman that runs it, and I thought maybe you could become his apprentice. I didn't really want to do it because it sounded like work or something, and this was something I did for fun. However, the guy did have a full studio, all kinds of equipment, editing bays, and he was a retired German documentary filmmaker. He had come to the United States after the war, had a film career, in the Bay Area, and had ended up kind of retiring in the community where I lived, this small town, and had this banging public access studio that he built. He ran it. It was his passion. And so when I first showed up to kind of have an interview, I think he felt the same way. Like he didn't really want an intern.
He's like, I'm doing this for fun. I don't want to have to have him.
Yeah. And he said, I don't want any kids. They they're always late. They chew gum and they spill soda and they ruin my equipment. And I was like, well, I won't do it. I promise I'll be a good intern. And so he reluctantly gave me a chance. His name was Paul Moeller. And he started off by saying, well, let's watch all these videos that you've made. Well, to say he was horrified was an understatement. This guy, he said, you have no lighting, your footage. And what are you doing for audio? And honestly, as I was like so on the defense, like, oh, and I'd seen like in Hollywood, I was like, oh, we had a boom guy. And he's like, there's no boom. Don't lie.
Just imagining Vim Vendors is like attacking this young boy's work. What are you doing? This is terrible.
No, he tore everything apart and said, we're going to have to take you back to the basics. And you're going to learn about shot composition, tripods, lights, sound. And quite frankly, so at that point, I had already been doing it, as a kid, just for fun. And the passion was there. But he really began with all these different fundamentals, and also hand in hand, how to actually do, well, it was more advanced tape to tape editing.
Yeah. Yep.
It was still before digital editing, but it was like full on machines with shuttles and color correction things. So Paul ended up, I think when he realized how serious I was and I didn't spill soda on his equipment, I was actually always early because I was so fascinated. It became like this symbiotic relationship where I wanted to do any assignment, anything. And I learned so much from him. And in the bio, you mentioned the film, The Bomb. When you read the bio, The Bomb, that premiered at Berlin 2017. And it was so cool. I basically was over there in 2017, standing there kind of taking in, we were the opening night film at Berlin. And I was just standing there and I thought, Jesus, this is really interesting. Everything Paul taught me brought me to this point. And now I'm back in his country where he started. And it's something I felt very moved by that. All the fundamentals, all those hours I put in with him had led me to a place where I was like at this prestigious opening. And so I wrote him and shared a picture and just basically thanked him. And we had stayed in touch, but I just was like, I really wanted him to see that everything that he had done had kind of led to a result of me, having this kind of moment. And unfortunately at that time he was battling dementia and he was under the care of like a caretaker person. And that person wrote me back and said, hey, Paul can't physically write and type anymore, but he wants you to know he got the message and he's moved. And
let's say I'll watch that documentary.
I'm like,
it's like, honestly, it really is like the Karate Kid. He was
amazing.
And I was the young guy, but it was video instead of karate.
I mean, that's your film school.
That's totally free film school. What a gift.
Honestly, that was by the time I graduated high school, we had worked it out that I could go for the last 2 periods in my senior year and got school credit for even being his intern. There was no film classes.
Yeah. So no radio and TV or anything in.
Yes. So the school was like, well, if you're working and you're learning this trade, we can give you credit for that.
They had frog training, but no radio and TV.
Yeah. But anyway, that led to that. And anyway, I was off and running after that. But it always frustrated me when I tried to go the film school route because I would be back in classes, like beginners classes with a lot of that stuff I had learned all in high school. So I gravitated more towards then just going out and working on sets when I was 19, 20, 21 until I got my own break, because I felt more comfortable just doing the work instead of sitting and kind of learning those fundamentals all over.
That goes across your career in so many ways. One, just your approach, your style, and you're just like, let's not, like the pushback, like let's not, and I want to go to Jane's first, but like, let's just, like, you just grabbed a camera and said, get in the car and I'm going to go find it.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to go do it. Like like we did a film Drown. It was just like, hey, as long as we don't put sticks down in downtown LA, we can shoot for free. Like, let's just go do it.
Yeah.
And make a film. So you leave frog jumping and you go to LA, or where did you go after that?
Well, technically there was a pit stop in Sacramento for the first 6 months after high school, I thought I would enroll in a community college in Sacramento. And they did have a couple film classes. So like, but I was like thinking, I was like, who am I kidding? I needed to be in LA. And my best friend from high school, which I left out that part of the story, but in high school, I formed a best friend who was the one other video guy. And he had a very different trajectory. He didn't do the internship with Mueller, but he and I ended up doing making all kinds of videos together and collaborating, and it culminated with us making a feature-length documentary of our entire senior year of high school. And so this guy went on to have his own career, and he got accepted to USC. And I was envious, to say the least. I was like, man, he's down there like in the mix. He's seeing all kinds of rad screenings. He's rolling around LA. And so my friend, his name's Lucky. He's like, Lucky, like, you should come on down, man. Just check it out. So I went down, and wouldn't you know it, he was a freshman at USC, and he was on a floor in a dorm. Him, Ryan Johnson, Steve Yedlin, and a whole host of other talented young filmmakers who now are people that are out there with big careers. And I came in just as the friend from his hometown and was kind of like tagging along. And they were all so gracious. Back then, it was a real cross-pollination. Like Ryan Johnson, who I'm sure you guys are aware of, he was like in my Super 8 short films. And anyway, McKee and I kept collaborating, but ultimately I ended up the street from them, literally up the street from USC at LA City College, enrolled in film classes there. And that was where I had my first exposure to basically a documentary course. And it was so great because it was a deep, deep dive into the history of documentary cinema. And for some reason, more than a lot of the other things I was being exposed to, that really spoke to me, like cinema verite, Maisels, Penny Baker, all that stuff. When I first was exposed to that, then I really thought, oh, I could do this. And so that was kind of a shift right there. And I started to feel like I had my own identity instead of glomming onto my buddy who was at US. And they were going in a very specific feature narrative kind of USC route. I kind of gravitated more to like a cinema verite underground thing. And I said, what am I doing here? I belong in New York. And so I left LA after about a year. And when I was 20, moved cross country to New York, because that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be closer to Jim Jarmusch, Spike Lee at the time, Woody Allen, and this whole kind of idea of filmmaking that was going on there, which seemed more independent and gritty and interesting. Truly, that's what led me to New York. I was pursuing an internship with Woody Allen, and it kind of worked out, but at least it was something that got me there. It actually got me to the city. And then that's what ultimately led to Jane's Addiction, like a year and a half later.
I've never gotten the story how you got in that camp.
Well, I memean, gosh, man, so I had showed up in New York, and just as a kind of a way to get in, I was taking a summer course at NYU, which was awesome because it was hands-on 16 millimeter. We were making shorts. I still have those shorts. I actually really love them. These beautiful films I made in the summer of '95.
Are those out? Can you digitize them and upload them, or?
Yeah, they're on my YouTube.
Okay, cool. I'll check them out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like they're just like really beautiful collages. Honestly, a lot of the stuff that you see in my work right now, that summer I feel like I found, where it was just collages of people. There's one of my films is just called Humans Walking, and it's a 3-minute film, exactly what it's claiming to be. It's montage of people walking set to this like really trippy soundscape. Well, the professor at the NYU program tanked this film. In all my films, as a matter of fact, I got in a lot of trouble because they said I wasn't doing the assignments. And maybe that was true, but I was having fun with the camera. I was making films. I just wasn't doing the assignment of like, you have to do a film with a close up, a wide shot, a medium shot, and you have to check all these boxes. And I'm like, again, that felt like stuff I had done when I was in high school.
Mm.
I was like, you're going to give me a 16 millimeter camera, film and development. And we had to stay for insurance reasons right around the NYU campus. But I was like, no, I've got to go to Battery Park, man. And so I went out of the
zone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was basically getting in trouble, and it was clear that wasn't where I was going to stay.
It was clear.
The access to the equipment.
It was clear because they asked you to leave.
Yeah.
But also, then I had it was just an interesting time because I was always, even back when I was in LA and going to LA City College, later when I first moved to New York, always doing PA and any kind of job on set that I could get. Costume assistant. I was a dolly grip assistant. Once I was one of the guys that slept in the equipment truck overnight to guard.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that I could do to get in and around the world of filmmaking, I was equally interested in that, and like a sponge, just soaking up all of the knowledge. So that was really interesting. And but there in New York, I was doing that, and so while I was working, doing some assistant jobs, I also took some NYU extensions classes, which were awesome at the time. They had actual Steenbeck film editing. And so that was probably the one that made the biggest impact on me, because I was also equally interested in editing my own material. I wasn't a person that just wanted to shoot it. I wanted to come back and actually piece it all together. So learning about cutting film and doing all that, having that hands-on experience was great. Now finally decided I was going to get legit, and I transferred into School of Visual Arts, which is a really awesome art school on 23rd Street in New York. And I was like, okay, I'm done moving around. I'm going to focus and just be a filmmaker and study. And SVA was where I thought I was going to live. But it only lasted 6 months because I got an opportunity to go film a kind of young upcoming rock band on a European tour. And I had this crossroads moment of like, do I stay in school and keep paying money to go to school and take classes, or go to Europe and explore and travel and film? So I took the adventure.
Yeah. How did that opportunity come to you?
I just, oh my God, it's like this rabbit hole of things. But in full disclosure, I was living in the Lower East Side, and I was walking one day on Avenue A, and there was a sign up on I guess a telephone pole or a light pole, and it said drummer wanted for band. Influences: Sonic Youth, Nirvana, Pixies, Breeders, etc. And I was like, I love all these bands. I'm not a drummer, but I would love to film a documentary of a band like trying to make it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I could film them trying to find the drummer and whatever. And so that was the thing. I pulled the little tab, called the number, and I said to the guy, hey, I'm not a drummer, but I'm a young filmmaker and I want to film rock and roll. And the guy, he was like, sure, come on. Yeah, it's great.
Who was on the other line? Who was on the phone?
His name was Thomas Constanza.
Okay.
And the band was called Flu 13. He actually did end up having a career. Like if you Googled him, you'd be like, oh, damn, he became like a music producer and stuff. But at the time, he had this upstart band, and man, I just jumped in and started filming, because the band gave me access to follow them around, all them playing in all the little small nightclubs, CBGB, Brownies. There was so many of them, but the Cooler, all these places in the mid 90s in New York. So then, if you can imagine, I was like kind of dabbling in film school, working on sets, but I really was obsessed and interested in the classic rock and roll films, which I had been exposed to, the documentaries, of like some of the great documentary filmmakers in the 70s had made these landmark films with rock bands. So just as a fan of those films and that genre, that was what I was aiming for. I was like, well, maybe that could be something I could do. So I was trying to make that film on my own, and that led to someone else saying, well, we've got another band. And I thought, great, we could make the documentary with 2 different bands trying to make it. And one of those bands then said, hey, we're going to Europe for this whole long tour. Do you want to come along? And that led to that. So I came back from from this amazing European adventure. And
what band was that?
They were called Rain Still Falls.
Okay.
The Flu 13 and Rain Still Falls. And it was this, fortunately back then I didn't have digital editing. So a lot of this stuff, it didn't actually get edited, and, some collages exist, but we were just gathering all this footage. But I got back from that. And I think if you're young and if you're getting your foot in like that and you're doing the work, the word starts to spread. Next thing we know, it said, oh, hey man, the Rain Still Falls. They said, we got a friend who's just signed to Capitol Records. He's doing an album at Kingsway Studio in New Orleans. Would you want to go film the making of that album? And I was, fuck yeah, man. So I went down, and that guy's name was Don Piper. And so I ended up making a whole kind of documentary of, which that one I did edit, but of him making an album in this historic music studio in New Orleans. So by this point, I'm starting to think I'm 21, 20 and turning 21. There's money to be made, and there's travel to be had all through this camera. And so rock and roll filming seemed to be like a niche that was opening up for me. Back in New York, after I'd done the thing for the Capitol Records guy, who became a really good friend, Don, another person I met on the set of a rap music video was a really bold photographer and guy named Carter Smith. And he was having a cigarette on a break, and he said, he's like, man, you're really good. And he's like, you like rock and roll films? And I was like, yeah, I love rock and roll films. He's like, me and you, kid, we're going to make rock and roll movies, the greatest fucking rock movies of all time. And I was like, really? Sweet. And he was probably 6-7 years older than me at the most, but he seemed like an elder, like
veteran. Yeah.
He's got a path. And he's like, me and you, kid, we're going to do shit together. I was like, fuck yeah, man. So within probably 2 months, Carter had hustled 2-3 months after that meeting. And this is 1996, maybe turning 1997, actually. But he got us out on the road filming 311.
Yeah.
That was it. Now, like, fuck, dude, this is a real break. Like, this isn't a band trying to make it. Those guys had huge audiences. We were on the road. I was seeing like the lap of luxury in a sense of like, holy shit, man. They had the best weed. They had massages. They had tables of food. And it was just pretty fucking mind blowing for a young guy. And
so you get access everywhere. Like you're there. Everyone's like, oh, there's Kevin. And you're just like fly on the wall everywhere.
It was a blast, man. Yeah. And I always said, this all leads to Jane's Addiction, but that 311 period was so sweet because it was like, it was exciting for us. It was fun to be out on the road, and there was enough resources finally to do whatever we needed to do. So we ended up making a project that was a music video that went to MTV called Beautiful Disaster. It was one of their songs. To this day, I still see that video and I think it's pretty badass, man. Mixed media, it had Super 8 video, like it was just this beautiful collage of the band. But then one thing led to another, and it was like 311 was happening. And now our friend who was a producer said, I can get you guys on the road with Bush over in Ireland. Great. So Carter and I go to Ireland. And then while we were in Ireland, I remember Carter said, I got something big for us, kid.
Yeah. He's 27. He's 27.
I'm like, well, what is it? He goes, Jane's Addiction's reuniting. And I got the inside scoop on it. Me and you, we're going to make the fucking movie of it. And I was like, what? Jesus, man. Like, for real? And Carter just had a way of making shit happen. And he had a connection to the band, through like his friend that had been on the Grateful Dead tours back in the day with the now manager of Jane's Addiction. And so he's like, basically, we can get a treatment to them. And so we hold up in my apartment in New York, smoked tons of weed and just focused on whatever we could do. We got this amazing kind of a treatment of like, here's this Jane's movie that we're going to make. And got it to the band, and it took some start and stop. And
the biggest feat in that, smoked a bunch of weed and focused. Yeah, that was the biggest accomplishment.
I mean, I may or may not have like some kind of ADHD issue.
And it
actually helped me
Focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does that for people.
Understood.
At least in the early days, it was like a helpful tool to like,
Yeah.
get in there.
That
I don't do it
tracks.
now, but anyway, so all of that happened in a pretty fast period. It was like from pulling a ticket or pulling a number off of
Yeah.
a poll in the Lower East Side to a year and a half later, we're out making a feature film with Jane's. Huge budget for us at the time. It's like $1 million.
That's
And
crazy.
The creative thinking. Like
Yeah.
if you hadn't done that.
Yeah. And then it got a little, it was I still always, as I said, loved indie film. So like, Jim Jarmusch, Spike Lee, whatever. So there was like that stuff was still alive as well. So we had the bright idea, Carter and I, that we were going to mix Sankey Lee into the Jane's Addiction film as like a filmmaker lost on tour with the band. So injecting a fictitious element in what otherwise was a real documentary. And so Sankey had been in Jim Jarmusch's Coffee and Cigarettes, but also Mystery Train. So to me, Sankey was like a cinema god in a sense. He was like, dude, this guy is from like, these fucking amazing Jarmusch films, and his older brother is Spike Lee. So there was this kind of strange synergy. And unfortunately, with the Jane's film, there was a lack of focus on all of our parts. And I think then I was a young filmmaker. We didn't necessarily handle it the best way of how to balance a fictitious storyline with a real band of that magnitude that was not going to be like our subjects of like, oh, wait, what scene do you want us to do today, guys? Like Jane's was just going to do whatever the hell they were going to do. Our story be damned. So it was like, we actually got a real documentary, but then because we had brought Sankey along on the tour, we still kept shooting our little like interstitial skits and things with him. And he's still in the movie, but it wasn't like the original pitch where it was going to be this true mesh of like an indie film meets a rock and roll.
Yeah, man, good luck in that environment to get any kind of structure with those dudes and how creative they are. I can only imagine some of the esoteric ideas that were thrown out of like, what to do or how to shoot. So like, I mean, good on you to even the idea made it in some form, right?
Yeah, it did. I mean, and it created a lifelong friendship. Sankey and I still are friends, and I mean, I don't know. So we all bonded in that extremity. But yeah, also that particular Jane's film, I think it's public knowledge and well documented. It became dubbed the Relapse Tour because it became this incredible crash and burn relapse. By the middle of the tour, once crack and heroin were on the scene, there was not, the film was just going to be whatever the hell it was going to be at that point. It wasn't, we lost control as filmmakers of like, we're making this thing. It was like, we're just documenting the madness. And so, but it is funny if you ever see it, you'll be like, oh, that's why Sankey is in there. And he's in there all the way through. It's just not that it actually makes a whole lot of sense.
So, and you became good friends with Jane's and those guys and built relationships with those guys. And so where is your head at in the middle of that? Like, are you just like, what the fuck did I get into? Like, was there like...
I think I had always just really wanted to be a professional. So on some element, I was super proud of like, but I was still at the beginning of my career, but I felt like I had arrived and made it like, oh man, we're, now even in that short period of time, it's hard to think back, but I felt like, oh man, I've been out on the road, we've been 311 and Bush and we were doing all, and now Jane. So I felt in some way that experience wise, we were really professional. Yet what I still didn't understand was just how difficult our industry would be to navigate. And that continues to this very day, even though I'm 49. So well over 20 plus years that I've been navigating. Because even the Jane's film, we made it. It took a really long time to edit it. There was a lot of difficulties. The financier pulled their financing at one point because of our drug footage that was in the movie. Like the Warner Brothers backed out of the whole project and it stalled us out. And we were like, fuck. And even once we finally got it all put together and edited into a feature film and premiered it at Slamdance, then it was another 4 years just to get the movie distributed and out in a limited theatrical. And I guess at the time, DVD, like Netflix was around. It was just so all of that became kind of a painful thing of like, oh, we had arrived, and yet the industry was just your film would just go. You were out of control of like what would happen with your works.
You learn that your most important is not their most important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that time, this is I'll promise I'll button this up and we could move on. But I would just say
this is great, dude. This is fascinating. I'm loving it.
Interesting is probably, I think it was 2000. Yeah, year 2000, maybe late 1999. The guitarist Dave Navarro actually pulled me aside because we had been in LA and we'd been editing and doing little pickup shots. I mean, that movie and that tour was over, but just the editing and being out, we were kind of like living in the band's backyard and just trying to make this movie come together. But at one point, the guitarist pulled me aside and he said, "Look, man, when I met you, you idolized Woody Allen, Spike Lee, Jarmusch. You wanted to make indie films. And now look at you. You're basically just a hang-on person in our world." And he goes, "Kevin, this is what happens. People get in our world and then they never leave. You were a filmmaker. You wanted to make movies. What happened to that? Where is that? Instead, you're just kind of hanging out here and like in our shadow. Is that really what you want?" And he had harsher words than this, but I really kind of needed it, man. He kind of broke me down. He was like, we had some struggles because, like I said, we lost financing on the film. Warner Brothers backed out because it was like basically X-rated at that point. And he's like, "Look, man, I know, you're struggling. You didn't really get paid from the movie and all that." He goes, "I'm going to hook you up. I'm going to give you some money, but you got to promise me you're going to get the fuck out of here, go back to New York and make an independent film and get back to who you are. Otherwise, you're going to be lost in this thing. And but he's like, if you agree to go back and do it, then I'll give you some money." And at that time, it didn't take a whole lot of money for me to feel like.
So
that's badass.
But real quick, tell the story about when Perry found out he had all that money stolen to him and what you did. This is who Kevin is.
This was at the same time. There was a really bad case where Perry Farrell, the lead singer, found out at the same time as Navarro was giving me this pep talk that you got to go home and I'll help you out. The lead singer found out that someone had been embezzling from him like a lot of money for a lot of years. And he was really bummed out. And there was kind of a vibe going around of like, "Hey, man, we're going to have to shut down work because this embezzlement's happening." And I was like, "Fuck, man." So I went to Perry and I just said, "Look, man," at the time I was actually living in his guest house. I felt really bad, because I really idolized this guy. I mean, he was like, at that point, kind of like my new Paul Muller. He was like the guy that was teaching me the ropes of the industry and all that stuff. To imagine that he had been stolen from and now he was destitute really fucking bummed me out. And so I just said, "Look, man, I know it's not much, but right now I've got $80 in my bank account at Wells Fargo. If you drive me up there, I'll withdraw 40 of it. I'll give you 40. I'll still have 40. And maybe we could at least just kind of get through this week." And Perry just looked at me like this strange look and then busted out laughing. And I was so confused. Like, no, I'm serious, man. Like, you've been so good to me. Like, I'll help. I want to help you. He goes, Kevin, you don't understand. I still have millions of dollars. It's just many more millions were stolen. I'm fine. And he goes, "But you know what? You just revealed your heart right there, man. And that's why we love you."
That's amazing.
That's amazing, isn't it?
That's amazing.
Well, because when people were like, "Oh, Perry's broke now," I was like, that meant something different to me.
Yeah.
As a struggling artist.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did end up taking Dave up on that offer. I went back to New York and teamed up with the guy that I had that first Capitol Records job with, Don Piper, who had an old 1967 Harvester school bus that his dad gave him. And we put together all of our friends, including young actor named Eddie Steeples. And we created this film called Caravan Summer, which was this kind of documentary feature film hybrid of a group of artists in 1999 feeling like there was like a social apocalypse kind of forming in New York City. And so they all get on this old school bus with this goal of heading out west to start a new life in Oregon, kind of getting off grid. And so that was the premise of the film. And I basically, in my mind, was honoring what David said. It was like, yeah, dude, I'm not filming rock bands, even though Don Piper is a musician and he plays music in the film along the way. But it was all like these little acting moments, and there was a story. But it's funny because we were traveling in an old school bus, which did really break down several times. And so then it was a real true hybrid of documentary and this fiction that my partner Monica and I had kind of written this outline of the story, but then real life also would crash in like we
and that's
really
a
did.
Signature style for you. I mean, that's the what, Down by the River, that's the train movie, that's the Eller movie that's right now is this sort of like weaving these beautiful like sort of created worlds and uncreated worlds.
Yeah, the two basically do go hand in hand. It's like I was a kid raised on Hollywood movies, and I love movies and stories like that, fiction. But then my soul, I think, is like true, like cinema verite documentary, making a movie out of real life things. So somehow in that, I'm fascinated in that middle ground with those two worlds.
Well, also you are, which is my hats off to you, is that you don't, the Hollywood machine, as you know and I know, takes forever and is impossible to wait years to get to do something. You grab a camera and you say, hey, let's go. And or you write a script and you're like, hey, I figured out a way to do it. Like you've always figured out a way to do it.
Yeah.
And that's been even in more recent years, that's how the Downey Sr. film came to be.
Yeah.
My wife and I and Chris Smith came to Robert and had this idea to do something. We thought it was going to be a film about Robert himself and his process. Like, oh, that'd be cool. And Chris had done Jim and Andy, which was about Jim Carrey's process. And, I had done a bunch of cool stuff kind of behind the scenes documenting of Robert. And so we thought as a team, we could all put something together about Robert. And Robert just like that said, not interested to do a film about me, but we should do something about my dad. And oh man, I was like, that's incredible because his dad was like an underground cinema.
I mean, he was the legend to Jarmusch and all those guys. Yeah.
Totally, man. I mean, he was the OG,
Yeah.
And he blended styles. He also loved documentary and fiction. So anyway, so that all began with no development, no pitching. It was like, okay, well, let's just send you guys out and just document a little bit of stuff with Senior in New York. And let's just see. Literally, Robert and his wife, Susan, and my wife, Emily, were all involved. And they just said, let's see what we get. Let's see if there's something there. It was almost like fishing. We went, had a couple shoots, and Chris and I had never actually worked together. So we just both had cameras and jumped in and kind of started filming some stuff with Senior. And it didn't take long to realize, like, to go back to my childhood, there's gold in them hills.
Yeah.
That frog can jump.
Yeah. So that's what led to that. There was no like pitching it and it's like long development. And that was something I think even Robert with his experience had thought was frustrating sometimes, where these projects just get talked about to death. And what was awesome with Senior, it was such a low cost thing. It was just a couple plane tickets. We already had the cameras and we just kind of couldn't get it going. But then it became a self-starting thing where it was like, oh, we've really got something. And that's what led to that. And it was a beautiful thing for everybody in the end. But
yeah, talk a little bit about that process for you, because you got to spend a lot of time with Robert Sr.
Well, it was amazing. Just because, like I said, I mean, I was very aware of his films. Flashback, you kind of cut back and forth, but to 1996, when I first arrived in New York City, and my partner, Monica, that I was with, she said, look, if we're going to work and be together, you got to learn a couple things, pal. Basically, you got to fucking listen to classic Rolling Stones records. So like, okay. And then you got to watch these two films. Putney Swope by Robert Downey Sr., and Opening Night by John Cassavetes. I mean, this was like a requirement to even
date.
Just even get,
just to even be allowed to come over.
Yeah. And both blew my mind. I didn't know. So she had gone to Cooper Union, which was an art school there. So she was fully versed in this New York cinema and underground cinema. But the Downey Sr. stuff really impacted me because it was, like so many people, I hadn't really seen anything like that. It was like this very fresh cinematic perspective he had. And so for me, it was really exciting to get a chance to get in there. Again, similar to my early experience with Paul Muller, where I had a person that was, many years my senior. If you put me in that situation, a lot of times I can just shut the fuck up and become a sponge. And so with Senior, that was the case. I realized I could just absorb all of his insights, knowledge, experience if I just listened a lot. And we did do that. We filmed the documentary, but there was so much that was not in the film of just time spent together, watching things together. He was gracious enough to watch my movies in their rough cut form. For example, you mentioned earlier a movie of mine, The Pushback. It was a Texas documentary about politics and people fighting Trump's policies in Texas back in 2018, 19. Well, while working on Downey Sr., we took a break one day and he watched the whole rough cut and had very specific feedback about rhythm and pace and, things that only another filmmaker would kind of get into the weeds like that. And
he said, you need a assistant.
Yeah.
You need audio.
Yeah. And don't spill your soda on my equipment.
Robert Sr. was probably like, dude, your audio is too good. Your camera was too good.
Senior, no, what he would do on that film is he'd be like, pause it. You go, you don't need that last 30 seconds right there. Cut it.
That's amazing.
What? Bloop, bloop, bloop. Cut. Play it again. And then he'd look at me and go, and then the film would go on. I mean, so he was just all about rhythm and pace. And once a point was made,
dude, that helps you a ton.
Yeah.
Like that helps you, knowing you, right? Because you're like this just musical sort of, so that you need that a little bit. That's great.
And unfortunately, but that's the kind of stuff that working with him was. It was like there was the movie that we made, but there was the time spent with him late night. Wait, hold on. It's like, you remember Show and Tell? I just got to show you.
Yes. We're getting some Kevin Ford show and tell, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you not on the visuals.
Real quick, this is a show and tell portion. So first of all, one of the things, sure, there was a couple of awards that came out of the Downey Sr. thing, but really I got this.
Oh, talk our ear listeners through it. Okay,
it's a yellow molded Robert head.
It's like a bust. It's like
with flowers.
With flowers coming out of it. Daisies.
So without that film, I don't think I would have that. But this is the pride and joy. This is a picture of Senior and I editing together.
Oh, that's
awesome.
And those are the kind of moments that I'm talking about. So for those that can't see it, it's a black and white picture of Senior and I huddled in his apartment around a monitor, looking at it, rough cut of the film together.
That's so cool.
So he had a big hand in the cut.
Yeah, well,
well, I mean, also too, the idea that you brought to that cut, which, I mean, it's hard for me to know whether like your best trait. I mean, you're just such a threat in all the different areas, but like that is not necessarily the way. I mean, maybe it's the same thing as Jane's and bringing in him, but bringing him into his own doc to that was genius.
So everything as filmmakers, you're going off references, but when we brought Sankey, and Carter and I decided we wanted to bring Sankey in to the Jane's film, our idea was we were trying to emulate Godard in Sympathy for the Devil, where he had brought in actors in a junkyard and then harsh cut, blended that or whatever with the Rolling Stones in the studio. So it was like this kind of weird contrast of like these actors acting mixed with the Rolling Stones making a record. Now, obviously that was just a jumping off point, but we were like, oh, can we inject like indie film sensibility into this like classic rock band reuniting and on tour? Same thing here was the film Gimme Shelter. I thought about that a lot, how the Rolling Stones, it cuts and they're in the editing room of the documentary that you're watching. And so the movie will literally cut, break the wall, and now you're in the editing room of the exact movie you're watching the Rolling Stones debate, should the scene even be in the movie? And then it jumps back into the film. And so early on in the rough cut of Senior, I thought, man, if we could pull that off, like just what the editor had on, because we had all this stuff of him, because he always wanted to see dailies. He wanted to watch footage, like, because he was just so interested in the process. And so it became apparent to me that if we just intercut the scene that you're looking at, like say Robert Downey Jr. and his son Exton, and then I could break the wall and it's Senior in the edit room saying, I like this. Yeah, that's good. And then we just go right back into the scene. But that comes, from Give Me Shelter.
Yeah.
And again, you take the inspiration and then it becomes its own thing. But I mean,
it's one of my favorite elements of the doc, was just like, getting to film the master and get to see the master work on the master.
Right.
It's great.
Senior, it's the film does show that a little bit, but we really, truly, he and I edited an entire 2-hour feature that is different than the released version. So the released version is 90 minutes on Netflix. And, but Senior, it's called the Senior Cut. It's a 2-hour thing, and it's comprised of totally different material. In a lot of cases, outtakes from the other documentary that didn't fit. It's a whole different movie, even though it's from the same pool of footage to work on both. So the Senior Cut was just like wild and non-linear, and it has all kinds of extra great moments of like Norman Lear and Alan Arkin and some of our people that were in the film. But at the same time, it's almost like a counterpoint to the released version. And, at one point when we were releasing Senior and we were out on the road with it and stuff, there was, at the time, talk that maybe the Senior Cut could come out as well. But it's just tough because all of the stuff in that would have to be relicensed for that purpose.
Yeah.
It was truly like a whole other 2-hour feature, but it exists. And it's really interesting. It's a total counterpoint to the
could you get away if we did an event or like a private screening, you get away with that, you think?
I think
so.
Senior would say,
let's talk about that. That could be fun.
Yeah. I think Senior would be like, you got to do it. Do it like in an alley and don't charge money and just
rooftop somewhere in New York with a big screen. Yeah. I'm in.
So Kevin, I feel like you're so consistently working in this space of documentary / narrative, maybe music video, cinematic collage art. And I know just for my own self growing up, and what I was moved by and inspired by was always documentary's always been my favorite. And as an actor, I'm drawn to what's realist of the real, but in a sort of cinematic space. And so like as an actor, I'm always trying to capture what's the most real on film. And that's not always possible. And I've been like schooled in several instances that, if it was real, it'd be a documentary. You're doing a performance, so just, perform. And I struggle with that a lot because I'm always trying to find and capture the most real moment. Do you feel a need to define that as a thing? Like, is it its own thing that you're doing? Like, it's not documentary or it's not narrative, or it is like, does it feel confusing to you in any way what you're doing?
It's not really confusing. It's, if I'm doing a documentary, I think like a feature filmmaker in terms of coverage and how I'm shooting a scene and how I'm telling it. And I think more like movie, like I'm making a movie. But then whenever I have had the chance and I'm doing an indie film or something with actors, I think doing a documentary, just forget the fucking lights, forget all this stuff. These two people are connecting and I got to capture it. Just like when I'm backstage with Jane's Addiction, you just got to capture what's going on between these people. So hopefully they have a chemistry.
So when you're shooting an indie film, You're trying to capture it like a documentary.
Yeah, and
You're doing a documentary. You're shooting it like that's fucking fascinating.
So I guess
amazing.
it should be probably should be confusing, and maybe now it will be if I'm thinking about it. But in theory, that's what I do. Like there was a scene in the movie Senior where Robert Downey Jr. is on the phone or like a Zoom call with someone, and he's realizing his dad is leaving, like dying, and it's really fucking intimate. At the time I was like struggling, like should I even be
cut?
Yeah.
Really private, dude. But I was in there and it was just me and him. There was obviously no lighting, nothing, but he was lit with this beautiful shaft of like New York City morning sunlight just coming in through a window. And at the time when I was rolling on that shot and he's kind of like wet in the eyes and stuff, I just thought, this is like, just don't move. Just, you've got it. Just hold this. And mostly too, don't interrupt the moment. And suddenly Robert's sitting there like grieving and realizing his dad's dying. And then imagine if I was like, oh, hey man, can you do that again?
Yeah.
Or can I get a insert shot of your hands or something fucking stupid? Like this is sacred. Just let it roll. And I feel the same way. If an actor now, if we switch over and I'm doing an indie film, if an actor is having a moment and they've done all the work and they're breaking down, the last thing I want to do is be like, excuse me, you just were soft, cut. And like, I want to just capture what's really going on. People are having an experience. And John mentioned the movie Drowned, which he helped me make. But that was an extreme case where I had two actors and I just let them loose in the streets of LA downtown. And we did have a script, but at the same time, they were reacting and playing off the actual environment. Homeless people, sirens, buses whipping by, whatever it is. So and it was just me. I was the only crew member. I didn't even have a PA. So it's just myself, camera. I did wire mics on them, and then I would use like a shotgun mic. Sometimes it's like a kind of a boom. But we captured it like a documentary. And I don't know that I did the best job that I could have with that film. I mean, it was difficult. Maybe you could always do better.
You made a feature film with two actors and yourself, and you can't tell that you were that's what I mean. It feels like a feature film.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I'm excited. Actually, I'm kind of excited. Maybe it's the wrong word, but when it's a small victory with a film like that, like it's now out on Amazon. So it's like people can actually go watch it. It exists. I think it's on Tubi as well, or coming to it, if not already. But the fact that movie exists, people can watch it. For me, that's a big thrill because it was
go check it out.
Incredibly independent. Drowned with Eller and Rasha Mosa. Anyway, but if you see it, it's truly like just the three of us. And that also, it's hard to quantify, but that was a really beautiful life experience to be out. And if someone had to go to the bathroom, say, okay, let's go to the bathroom. Or if someone said, I'm hungry now. So there was no schedule of like, okay, we shot 4 hours and now it's fucking break time. Like we just worked as a unit. And if someone had a need, we would just roll with it. Or remember one day, Eller had some incredibly spicy taco and he just face was melting and his eyes were watering. And it's like, we had to stop filming for a while because this guy was like melting down from this like habanero or something. But on a traditional movie that could ruin you. But we'll see if it happens or not, but I'm still always looking at the idea of doing more indie films. And maybe there's a middle ground of like, all right, well, what was extreme there was it was just me and the two actors.
Yeah.
Could I bring in a sound person? Even if they're not in there booming, at least hanging back and kind of helping me by mixing.
Yes.
Well, the last Eller, the Everything Is Stolen is you even reduced it to just you and Eller.
That's true. I know.
Not even yeah, and that.
Surely,
go ahead.
Everything Is Stolen is probably my most recent one. And I call it an experimental film, and it's not a documentary, but it's 100% real. But at the same time, it's not a documentary about a person's literal life or an issue. it's just a collage of a person, an aspect of a person. And in this case,
and his writing, his poetry.
Yeah. And in this case, Eller creates this amazing poetry, really expressive, personally investigative poetry. And so that was my jumping off point, was I wanted to make a film that matched the poetry. So in a poem, someone will reveal a lot, but it's kind of obscured. And so I wanted to make a film that, yes, it was Eller showing what's going on. At the same time, it's not literal and it's not real like a reality show or that type of a documentary. It's more like just this poetic experience, a visual collage. And that was a case.
It's the closest film to maybe taking a couple of mushrooms, I think, that you've got.
Yeah. Really,
it's so beautiful. Like, the great thing about you, man, is that you just said, okay, I got some time, I'm gonna go hang out with Eller and make something, right? And then it's like it's so beautiful. And it's gonna be at the El Paso Film Festival is where it's gonna premiere. And it's just like, you're not worried like, oh, where's this gonna live, or how am I gonna pay for this, or where's we gonna get money for it? You're just like, I'm gonna make something because I have to fucking make something. And then you make something beautiful, and then you give it to the world, and you're like, I hope you guys like it.
Yeah.
And like, it's the truest he's one of the truest guys I know in our industry that does that time and time again. Let's get Eller on a train. Let's go to California and film it. I'm going to you know what? I'm seeing this political thing happen. Talk to Richard, be like, I'm going to get in a truck and I'm going to go talk to people and see what's going on.
So craftspeople, children coming up in the world, go learn a skill. Get a trade, learn how to use a camera.
Your point a minute ago as well, but that's a good case where, let's say here, I've got this giant cinema. I challenged myself on Everything Is Stolen to not do it as run and gun. So if you ever see it, it's very composed. It's Paul Moeller.
It is very composed.
I use cinematic, big cinema lens on sticks.
Yep.
And he's got audio. So again, I'm thinking of Paul Moeller here. Like, he would be like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah.
And it works.
It feels very purposeful. It does not.
It's a beautiful film.
It does not feel like you just got out of your car and started shooting.
Wasn't running around chasing. It was just like, but I also never staged one thing. I didn't say, hey, can you go do this or that? Like, if anything, we did set up a couple things where the poetry is being read and it's like a shot in a junkyard and, you see the poetry. So, but that's composed, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It was just really fun. And so I want to do more stuff like that, but it is kind of a hybrid. And for me, as I'm looking in there, I can't help but see that person and think of the backstory of boyhood and some of those things. So
it's such an intimate, like, the Eller lets you into his life in a way that's like, I don't know.
There's no guard there.
Yeah.
It just, I hope it is enough of a smokescreen that, again, it's like, it's not totally actual, but it's also not fake. It's just some middle ground.
No, it's like a song. It's like a song.
Yeah.
Is what I look at it as. It's like here's this it's a poem. It is
like a poem.
Yeah. It's like you did a music video to a poem.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yeah. So other things he's working on.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming to a close.
Yeah.
I have like 30 questions. I didn't get to ask one of them, which
you'll
is
just
great.
have to come back.
I have to come back, which is awesome. No, it's awesome. I love it.
Because he's got things that he's working on that are coming up that I want to talk about.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So when 67 comes out, we're going to talk about that.
Real quick, we mentioned 67 bombs to Enid, but we didn't even say what it was. I'll just say it.
Can you please? Because it sounds amazing.
I told her a little bit before we started.
I've never even heard of this.
Okay, so 2.5 years ago, I moved to Oklahoma, left LA and moved to Oklahoma City. And I met these guys, Ty and Brandon, who had been researching and doing some preliminary filming in a community called Enid, Oklahoma. ENID, Enid. And there's a whole community of Pacific Islanders living in Enid, Oklahoma. It turns out they were displaced from nuclear testing on the Marshall Islands. The U.S. detonated 67 bombs over the course of some years. And the result is that the islands were made radioactive, many of them uninhabitable. the ones that are still inhabitable, you still have really high rates of cancer and diabetes and all kinds of other problems now. So there's a whole group of people that are living in the middle of the plains in Oklahoma. And so, I had the back story, or I had done the film 2017, The Bomb, which was more about the weapons itself. Did that with Eric Schlosser and another person, Smriti Kashari. And so that was about the weapon itself. What struck me here years later now when I met these guys and they were trying to make this film was it was about the human impact that the weapons led to, lives being disrupted, and in a sense, a whole place is just forever contaminated to where you have to now go and try to keep your life and culture alive in a foreign land. And there's all kinds of stuff that the film gets into there with, like, how is that going? Why are they here? How long have they been here? All the details, but just the high level of it is it's a portrait of islanders living in the middle of a landlocked prairie town in Oklahoma, and the challenges that come from that, and some of the challenges hopefully being overcome is what the film focuses on. And so we spent the last year, once I found out about it, they said, hey, if you want to join forces, we know that you have a backstory having done a lot of nuclear research, documentaries. So I joined forces and I'm co-directing it with my friend Ty McMahon. And then Brandon, who's the other guy, is the producer. And then we came to, I think we have to reveal, we came to John and he had some friends. And so, we're also like assembling a team to help make it the best story possible and aiming to get this thing out to film festivals. So right now, at this exact moment, fingers are crossed, because I also have brought in one of my really close friends and editor, Zach Passero from El Paso, who worked on the Pushback and Downey Sr. with me, and to help us in the fine cutting and final shape. It's about 90 minutes. So hopefully coming soon. And again, not a traditional informational doc. I hope that it's more of an expressive portrait of this unique group of people and their spirit. So that's
that
kind
just
of
sounds
the challenge.
incredible.
Yeah.
I can't
And
wait to
super
see
excited.
that.
Music. We, once again, just like my film, The Pushback, I had original music from Joseph Cash, who's Johnny's grandson.
Oh, wow.
We've got new Joseph Cash music
Oh,
setting into this, small Enid town. And anyway, it's like alchemy. You just hope it
wow.
creates something really beautiful. We're putting it all together, working our tails off right now on it.
Wow.
And hopefully it'll be out to festivals soon.
Oh,
So
wow.
we'll have you back on when that happens.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Awesome, man. It's such a great conversation.
Really great to get to know you and talk to you, Kevin. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, well, I hope if we come back again, I want to know what those questions were. I mean,
They're good ones, believe
No,
me.
I have so many. I mean, just the detail of even the early part of your career. I didn't know any of that, so it's so fascinating, and to get to spend that time with you and learn about how you've become such an amazing artist. So thank you, dude. Thank you for spending time with us.
Yep. Thanks so much.
yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Our show today was recorded in studio by the good folks at Record ATX. Check them out at recordatx.com. Our theme music is produced by Jonathan Price. You can check out some of the sounds he makes with his project, The Mid-Cities, on Spotify. Follow, subscribe, and smash that like button if you see one. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.